All right, so I've got my final coming up in Health and Wellness 3500, which cultural differences in healing. So all I'm doing is I'm going to go over the lecture notes that the teacher provided. It's an online class, so we are just getting this. We don't actually meet. Show. There's that. All right, so this should be a great controversial thing to start with in today's political climate. So, Module 8, how is gender related to culture? All right, so how is gender related to culture? Culture defines expectations about attributes and behaviors appropriate to women or men, and about the relations between men and women. Gender identities and gender relations are critical aspects of culture because they shape the way daily life is lived in the family, but also in the wider community and the workplace. Gender, like race or ethnicity, functions as an organizing principle for society because of the cultural meanings given to being male or female. Example, the division of labor according to gender. In most societies, there are clear patterns of women's work and men's work, both in the household and in the wider community, and cultural explanations of why this should be so. These patterns and explanations differ among societies and change over time. In all societies, the division of the social world in male and female results in a biased. Division results in biased, differentiated process of socialization. People are educated differently. To me, the educated differently is actually a big deal because I think the prevalence of ADD and ADHD is, I would say, typically a more of a male issue because males, the sitting in a classroom calmly learning for extended periods of time. Oh God, and Siri just got excited. So the sitting in the classroom calmly and learning in, the stereotypical classroom is more conducive typically, not in every case, but generally, for females. So I just read an article, I don't remember where it was from, about a teacher who got the little bicycle pedal stations that you can put under your desk in order to burn calories so that even though you're sitting at your desk, you're still doing something active. And she basically took her paycheck and bought probably 20 of them. And she said that she had much better grades, much better focus, and all of that stuff. And I didn't get to look into the sexual breakdown of the students, but I would wager that the males benefited greatly from it because they were letting their energy out because they are generally more energetic and don't have as much. They have a shorter attention span, especially as children. So they develop emotionally and intellectually different. That's obviously so. So emotionally, I mean, goodness gracious, that's probably the biggest difference between male and female. Outside the obvious, physical differences. So I would say emotionally is probably up there, and probably is the biggest reason that middle-aged men are the leading demographic that attempts suicide. So basically, you get to the middle of your life, you have all of these emotions tucked in. If you go and talk to anybody who you don't pay to listen to your problems, you get laughed at. And so you have to figure out how to deal with it, and I would say that's one of the main limitations of males in societies, that we don't actually have there's no clear path to dealing with your own emotions. And that may be because everyone's different, and they respond to, something like meditation or journaling or, whatever it is differently. Different behavioral norms. Let's see. Definitely different dress norms. Culture contributes a set of guidelines, implicit and explicit, from birth to old age. Cues on how to perceive, think, feel, and act. Say male or female of the group, culture, population. A result of differing socialization, each gender develops, evolves with their own norms, values, and behaviors. So norms, undo. Values and behaviors. So I do have an iPad with a stylus that I normally use for this, but I didn't want to have to record audio on the computer and then do a screen recording of the iPad for my first time. So I'm not doing that. Not always completely rigid, can change / adapt. That's yes. May or may not have some overlap. Yep. Influenced by urbanization, globalization. Yeah, I would say this is a big one because, if you're on the farm, you would have to split up, the duties between males and females. And, if you don't get, if you don't feed your cows, or you don't, plant the right crops on the right day in the right, situation, that's your whole livelihood. And so you want it to be as efficient as possible. And I was just listening to a podcast where it was a male and female, and they moved out to a farm, and the female did all of the duty. So it doesn't have to be male go out, do a bunch of work, lift heavy stuff, females inside cleaning up. So, and again, it was a podcast, so I couldn't tell if the woman was more physically fit than the male. But I would say typically that doesn't work out like that. And the female was very indignant about people asking when they would come where her father or brother or husband was, implying that she shouldn't be in charge and the male should. And she was not happy about that, even though I would be willing to wager a bunch of money that she is an outlier in that she is the one in charge and doing all of the work. I would say in most cases when a female helps, it's in addition to her husband or father or farm owner who is a male, just because of stereotypes and how everyone's grown up. And I would say on average, males are bigger and stronger, especially when it comes to upper body strength, than females. So that, it's just simple stuff. It makes sense. So, all right. Each contributes in their own way to health and risk of disease. Individually and collectively. Modern Western life allows for blending of gender cultures, sometimes by necessity. Women work outside the house. Yeah. So again, that goes to using that farm example, definitely more accepted in the Western world than it would be in, the Middle East or even Eastern culture. So may or may not be some overlap. Sometimes a gender role behavior is expected and allowed in certain circumstances. Men helping with child care, women help with crops, hard labor. Sometimes a gender role / behavior is expected and allowable. Whatever. There's in fact a wide variation in gender cultures across the globe. One behavior in a culture may be offensive, in another not. Yeah. Obviously the clearest gender disparity that comes to mind in today's society is the burqa required in some cultures in the Middle East versus not required here in the United States and in general in Western culture. So, whereas, even more progressive Western cultures, if it's like I was listening to a podcast and there's a woman who went into a church or wanted to go into a church in somewhere in Europe, and they were restricted so that they couldn't because they were wearing short shorts, and that was deemed to be not acceptable in the house of God. So even in Western society, it's sometimes offensive, where I don't think anyone there would have actually been offended by her doing that. But hey, let's see, some anthropologists theorize it may boil down to an attempt at control and power, and to control reproduction, an indispensable aspect of health and social evolution. Yeah, I guess so. Makes sense. It's more, I think it would be more akin to maybe not control and power, maybe keeping a valuable in a safe. So if you have a ton of money, you're going to put it in a bank because it's going to be safe. Whereas if you're in a society, where death is very common, and if you have 100 men and you have 100 women in your society, so you have 200 people, 50-50, if 99 men die and you have one man and 100 women, then he can sleep around and you can repopulate, and you'd probably have some trouble with related offspring getting together, and so you'd have issues down the line. But you could definitely repopulate much easier with one man and 100 women as opposed to one woman and 100 men. So you could have 100 people born at the same time in situation one, and you could have one person born at any given time, and you would be limited to at least every 9 months, if not more so, in situation number two. So, and depending on the culture, you could argue that would be even worse than just the birthing, because you'd have 100 men vying to procreate with one woman. So you'd have to establish some sort of pecking order, which if you have 100 men, they'll probably pick something violent, and it'll probably end up in the death of a couple of them, depending on the culture. So, yeah, I would definitely say, I don't know if it's, because the attempt at control and power, it seems more like the females in history were treated as slaves just to reproduce, whereas instead of being treated as homemakers who are valuable. So more just an issue with phrasing for this section than anything else. All right, different components of gender. Genetic gender based on genotype, combination of XY chromosomes, so it's XX and XY. Somatic gender is phenotype, appearance, secondary sex characteristics. So this is, I guess, what the transgender community would be trying to alter would be the expression of their gender. Psychological gender, so self-perception and behavior. I'd be interested to see any studies about self-perception of, more effeminate men or more masculine women, of their self-perception and behavior. I think that would be an interesting study. Social gender, cultural categories, which define how individuals are perceived by society. So again, that may go back to, especially in today's society, if you have a more masculine woman, she may perceive herself as a woman, but in like San Francisco, she may be seen, and people in her social gender, they may not know whether she identifies as a woman or a male. Basically today is very confusing. So gender is a combination of these elements. That makes sense. Social gender refers to values on how people must act, dress, think, look, speak, and agree on what the world is like / order. Each gender culture contributes in their own way to health and risk and disease. Okay, so this should be good clarification, because the whole own way to health and risk of disease is kind of confusing. So disease of male social gender. Men are encouraged to drink more, smoke more, and take more risks. Dangerous rituals. Type A behavior, attitude, and stoicism. Almost all culture, dangerous activities like war and hunting are exclusively male roles / behaviors. Passed down through child rearing practices. This results in a higher propensity to enable late health care. So, all right, late health. Stop it. Deny problems, delay. Stop! All right, I'm trying to do something. Delay seek care. Ignore early symptoms with poor prognosis. So yeah, that makes sense. If you've got, if you're feeling lethargic or tired, I would definitely say a man would try to power through it. Whereas a female might take the time to recharge and have a quote unquote me day to change that. And I think that's one of the things that definitely attributes to males having, in my opinion, a higher propensity for mental health issues, like depression or something like that. So I would say it also impacts them, because anything that they go, basically if you're not bleeding or have a bone sticking through or swollen, have a huge swelling somewhere, it's seen as a weakness to go in somewhere. So that definitely makes sense. So the diseases of the female social gender, so cosmetic surgeries, so they're definitely, females are more likely to undergo some sort of plastic surgery, which obviously is a risk every time. So my father's a surgeon, and whenever patients ask him what's the worst case, he always tells them the worst case is you die. And they're very confused because it's just a shoulder surgery or an elbow surgery or a knee surgery, not something where, even if you cut an artery in any of those areas, usually you can just clamp it right there and they can recover just fine. But because you have the anesthesia, one miscalculation, you get a decimal point off and that person's dead. So, all right. So plastic cosmetic. So adornment. I mean, how common is it for women to have earrings? I mean, that's piercings right there. That's pretty much every one of them. Posture, gait, high-heeled shoes. How much of a trope is it that the female wears high heels to an event but brings a pair of flip-flops or what are they called, flats, to wear after their feet get tired? So use a variety of products. Increases risk of negative interaction. So yeah, every female I've ever interacted with does a lot more stuff for their skin than I do. Let's see, food fads. I guess women are more likely to diet. I guess it's more socially acceptable for a man to have excess fat. So I guess there's less of a social pressure for men to follow any sort of diet guideline, which I guess that's pretty interesting. I haven't thought about that. Low threshold for medical consultation. That's a disease. Interesting. And obviously women are the only ones who can get pregnant, and that's a huge medical procedure, I guess, would be a good way. So gender and birthing. Father is expected to be there and assist. Not a universal culture trait. Some cultures may prefer female obstetricians and assistants. Some cultures prefer supine positions. Some cultures cut the umbilical cord after the passing of the placenta. Painful deliveries may be seen as giving power, strength, and fertility to the baby and mother. Interesting. I haven't seen that before. So I guess the concept would be the more painful the delivery, the more power and strength and fertility coming from the ether. I guess using the mother as a conduit to get into both the mother and the baby. In some cultures, both genders are pregnant. I mean, I guess, like we're pregnant, we're expecting. So I guess that could apply to Western cultures, like both of them are, I mean, it's a joint venture in the typical nuclear family stereotype. So let's see, keep men away. In some traditional Chinese cultures, women's body fluids are considered dangerous and polluting to men. That's interesting. Supine lithotomy position. Reclining is easier for and from the Western medical doctor's point of view, but often from a woman's point of view, it's better to stand or sit squat, with the midwife often right in front. In some traditional rural communities, dung may be rubbed into the umbilicus to stop bleeding, but that increases the risk of neonatal tetanus. I mean, that makes sense. You're shoving poop into where the baby has just been getting all of its nutrients from. So, yeah, that would be really great for the baby. Could a healthcare provider encourage a painful delivery? The patient might want it. Some cultures believe it confers health or special powers. Western medical constructs reject pain, and especially during delivery. The notion and ability to control or eliminate birthing pain is a result of modern Western science. So the notion as well as the ability. Interesting. Yeah, I guess if you think a painful birth is a good thing, you're not going to fight to minimize it. So males and pregnancy. Hegen. Interesting. I don't know what that means. Majority of human cultures exclude the man from the scene of birth, except for certain Native American, Eskimo, African, and Maori groups. In most modern Western culture, the father has a minimal role, that of the anxious spectator. Yeah, I would agree with that. Ritual Kuvade. Male adopts the female taboos during pregnancy. Interesting. Becoming emotional, worried, frantic. That's awesome. Kuvade syndrome. Male suffers from symptoms of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Interesting. Subconscious attempt at competition. Kuvade syndrome. All right, so father role. What can you do when you've medicalized pregnancy and delivery? You can just sit there and watch. So that's it. Society does give him some roles, usually functional and second/third tier behaviors /roles, such as prepare the baby room, pass out cigars, etc. Modern male roles can be much more involved with the pregnancy, even if you can't deliver. So you can support the woman, diet, baby care, etc. All right, so fertility is a universal concern, and pregnancy is not always viewed. Let's undo that. As a universal concern, and pregnancy is not always viewed as a medical condition. That makes sense. You're not sick. You're just pregnant. So, implying that pregnant is not outside the norms. That's fine. Okay. Some cultures have special rituals to enhance fertility. Where it fails is often attributed to the woman's relationship with the supernatural, rarely the man. That makes sense. Since, the woman carries it for 9 months where the man's just involved with the inception. So, in that, if you're looking at it from that point of view, it would definitely stand to reason that where the baby's going to spend most of its time would be the more important spot. So, which, obviously today we know it's a 50-50 deal. And if the woman or if the man's got not a lot going on down there, then they're going to have some issues. So, fertility is a way how a society defines a woman. Identity, healthy, natural, nurturing, and a man is a way how a society, whatever. A man strong, virile. Concepts of fertility are also intertwined with concepts of how the body works and anatomical maps. Example, a cold womb. Interesting. Infertile men may suffer from questions of masculinity and virility. Very threatening in traditional societies. Having a son is often proof of virility, even in modern societies. Sometimes you need male heirs to pray for their fathers and their peaceful death. Sometimes you need male heirs to pray for their fathers or their peaceful death is threatened. Oh, I see. So in some cultures, you have to have a male heir, I guess, to continue your lineage in order to pray for the fathers, and or else they can't have a peaceful death because they're the last of their line. Problems with fertility may have larger associations with the rest of the group, viewed as less of a person undesirable for marriage. That's pretty straightforward. If the goal of marriage is to continue your family line and you can't do it, then yeah, that would make you undesirable for marriage. So if you're just doing it to marry your best friend and to get tax benefits, then who cares? So All right, let's look at some Vietnamese traditional pregnancy beliefs. Yin is passive female principle associated with earth, wind, and cold. Predispositions to these elements may affect the pregnancy. Interesting. I mean, the cold makes sense, but the earth and wind? Because the cold may be a sign of poor circulation. But I don't understand how associating with earth and wind may affect the pregnancy. Pregnant women should not attend weddings or funerals or greet others farewell. Bad luck. Pregnant women should not wear necklaces. May cause the umbilical cord to wrap around fetus's neck. I guess they think the fetus is trying to copy the woman. Postpartum diet restrictions: well cooked and warm, no cold or sour foods or fruits. Interesting. Why fruits? Interesting. All right, so postpartum traditions. After the first month, parties held with food, gifts, and money presented to the baby and the family, a call to ancestral spirits and gods to bring good luck and health. After first year, quitting the cradle ceremony. Future vocational ritual. Baby is positioned around objects which, if chosen, determine his career path. Oh, that's interesting. Obviously, I don't believe that, but that's a pretty cool. It's a pretty cool little ceremony. Sitting month. Restricted activity and bed rest. No showers. May weaken immune system. Interesting. Sponge baths. Okay, but without getting hair wet. May stuff cotton in ears to prevent wind from entering the body and causing weakness. Heating elements may be placed on stomach. Believed to help women regain their energy, prevent ailments, digestive problems, uterine prolapse, headaches, back pain, poor vision, varicose veins, and wrinkling. Wow. Interesting. So the restricted activity probably helps them fully recover before they start doing anything. And the wet hair probably helps them since they probably have a weakened immune system after birth. Stuffing the cotton in their ears. I think that's just a supernatural thing. Heating element be placed on the stomach. I mean, I'm assuming this is after birth. Importance of men's reproductive health on women's health and fertility. The sexual and reproductive behavior of men is related to many adverse reproductive health outcomes of women, including unintended pregnancy, STDs, infertility, and cancer. Interesting. The sexual and reproductive behavior of men is related to many adverse reproductive health outcomes of women. Improving the sexual and reproductive health of men and increasing men's awareness of and involvement in family planning. Involvement in family planning can in part have a significant impact on women's health. Worldwide, there have been successful pilot programs. I mean, that makes sense. So if you improve the sexual and reproductive health of the man, obviously that's going to help towards having a more healthy baby, and increasing the men's awareness of and involvement in family planning. I mean, obviously, just by doing that, you're not going to get any unintended pregnancies just by making them aware and involved in the family planning. Which, I mean, so is this implying that men don't understand that having sex? I don't understand. So is this implying that men don't understand that having sex creates babies? Or that they're assuming that like a woman has some sort of contraception and so he's not responsible? Which I don't understand. Like, I mean, that's more believable than men just not knowing. STDs, yeah, definitely. If you don't know you have it, then that would definitely aid in the spreading of it. Many adverse reproductive health outcomes: infertility and cancer. I guess cancer, you could say it changes the cells, so it would affect the baby in some way. Definitely chemo treatment would destroy a baby. Goodness gracious. All right, so family planning is a foreign notion in many cultures and a value strongly emphasized in Western medicine and internal development. There are some success stories and factors involved in their success, including intense and long-term support from government or non-government organizations, education and involvement of both genders, and access to healthcare. Yeah. So module 8 is gender related to culture, and then so it's basically gender, different aspects of gender, and then reproductive health, which it's different cultural differences in healing. So I guess you'd have to go over gender in culture in order to separate those two and to go more in depth about healing. So yeah, that's module 8, part A. I will be editing this and then upload it to YouTube's. So and then I'll be back with part B later on. My way of making myself accountable. So my plan is to go through and record all of the modules before my final and then upload them and see if you guys like this information. That's super cool. If you don't, click on a different video. So but yeah, so I'm studying kinesiology. Or it was health and wellness, and now they're changing it to kinesiology. So I'm studying this, and so if you guys like this information, let me know. If you want me to study something like research something else, I would be more than happy to look into anything, exercise science or kinesiology related. And so my plan right now, because it's finals week, is to study this, but later on, if I cover all of this and get my finals done, my plan was literally just to go down the most researched supplements, starting with creatine, and then I think probably second would be beta-alanine, and just slowly going through all of the research on those and trying to break it down in a simple way so that people can relate to it and, decide whether they want to take that supplement or, just add it to either pre-workout, post-workout, whenever. And hopefully you guys like that. So, yeah, if you want to give me feedback, feel free to. And if you somehow stumble upon this and have no idea what I'm talking about, then, yeah, you learned something new.